So, once upon a time, not 1,000 miles from here, there lived a woodcutter who was a widower. And he lived with his daughter, and the two of them lived in a cottage, just the two of them alone. And every day the woodcutter would go into the woods, and he would cut a bundle of wood that he would take to market, which he would then sell, so that he and his daughter could make their meager existence. Now one day, his daughter said to him, "Father, Father, why is it that we cannot have more and interesting things to eat?" And the woodcutter said, "Very well, tomorrow I will go into the woods, and I will cut an extra large bundle of wood that I will take into market and hopefully sell for a greater price, that we indeed might have more and interesting things to eat." And so the very next day, true to his word, the woodcutter got up extra early and he went into the woods and he cut a very large bundle of wood. And he was going to take it to market, but he thought he was quite hungry and he knew he could not make it to market without something to eat. And so he thought he would go back home. And so he went back home and knocked on the door. "Daughter, daughter, please let me in, for I'm hungry and I must have something to eat before I go to market." However, the daughter, not recalling the conversation of the night before, had in fact gotten up and swept the floor and gone back to bed, locking the door behind her. Okay, kind of weird, I think, but that's all right, you know. She's a kid. And so the woodcutter thought, well, you know, it's early yet. I could cut a second bundle of wood. And so he went back into the woods and he cut a second bundle of wood. And he brought it back, and at this point it was getting late in the day, and he was very hungry, and he knew he could not make it to market without something to eat, just a little bit, anything. And he was getting a little bit worried about the time as well, and so he knocked on the door and said, "Daughter, daughter, please let me in, for I am hungry and I must have something before I go to market." However, the daughter, still not recalling the conversation of the night before, had in fact gotten up and she'd gone out to visit the neighbors, locking the door behind her. And the woodcutter was very tired, and he knew he would not make it to market, as previously stated many times, and he thought he would take a nap. And so he lay down next to the door and with his bundle of wood, and he fell asleep. And when he awoke, it was quite late, it was quite dark, and he was quite hungry, and he was quite cold. And so one more time, he got up and he knocked on the door. "Daughter, daughter, please let me in." However, the daughter, still not recalling the conversation the night before, and for some reason not noticing her father asleep next to the door, she had actually come home and figured her father had made arrangements to stay the night in town, and she'd gone to bed, locking the door behind her. And so the woodcutter was feeling pretty sad about this, and didn't really know what to do, and he laid down and he slept a little bit. It was a fitful sleep and did him no good. And he woke at one point and very cold and very tired, and he heard a voice. It said, "Leave your wood and follow me, and if you need enough and want little enough, you shall have good things to eat." The woodcutter thought, "Fuck yeah, I'm going to do that." And so he followed the voice for a while, but he wandered and wandered, and the voice soon disappeared, and he got quite worried and realized he was quite lost. And he was again very cold and very tired and very hungry, and he thought he might cry, but he knew it would do him no good, and so he wandered a while longer until he came to a place that was a vast clearing, and he sat down and began to tell himself, as if in a story, his own tale. And suddenly there was the voice again. I said, "Well, what are you doing?" He said, "Oh, I'm telling myself my own tale." The voice said, "Very well then, let's hear it." The woodcutter thought, okay, this is strange, but sure, and so he told the voice the tale of all that had happened since the previous day, when his daughter had first asked for more and interesting things to eat. And as he finished, the voice said, "Very well then, now close your eyes and mount as if it were a stair." The woodcutter said, "But I see no stair." And the voice said, "No, do as you are told." And so the woodcutter closed his eyes, thinking this was very strange indeed, and he put his foot up, and lo indeed, there was a stair. And he put his other foot up, and there was another stair, and another stair, and he found himself climbing up and up and up a vast flight of stairs. And he reached the top, and there was the voice again, and it said, "Now open your eyes." And the woodcutter opened his eyes, and he found himself in a strange place that was much like a desert. It was very bright light, and there were many multicolored pebbles lying around, pebbles that were blue, pebbles that were gold, pebbles that were red, pebbles that were white, all different colors of the rainbow that you could imagine. And the voice said, "Now gather as many of these pebbles as you can, and climb back down the stairs." And so the woodcutter did this, and he put pebbles in his hat, pebbles in his shoes, pebbles in his pants, pebbles in his shirt, pebbles in his underwear, if you had such things back then. One knows not. And he closed his eyes and he climbed back down the stairs. And as he reached the bottom of the stairs, the voice told him, "Now open your eyes." And the woodcutter opened his eyes, and he found himself, to his amazement and delight, in front of his own cottage. And there was his daughter waiting for him with her arms outstretched, for she'd been so very worried about him. And she said, "Father, Father, where have you been?" And he muttered something about a voice and some stairs, and it made very little sense to her. But she was happy to have her father back, and they went back inside and shared the last food that they had, which was but a handful of dates, and the woodcutter told the tale of all that had happened to him. And as he finished this tale, there was the voice again. It said, "Although you do not know it, you have been saved by Mushkil Gusha. Mushkil Gusha is the remover of all difficulty, so tell his tale Thursday nights, or give a gift in the name of Mushkil Gusha. And if you need enough and want little enough, you shall never go hungry or be in want." The woodcutter thought, okay, I can do that Thursday nights, no problem. This was great. Fun experience all around. Absolutely going to tell this on Thursdays. And so the woodcutter went to bed, not at all ever considering how peculiar it was. There's this voice talking to him, but you know, this is a story, so who knows. Time's long past. The woodcutter went to bed, and the very next day he got up and he took his bundles of wood into town. He was immediately able to sell them for a great price indeed. Such a price indeed. Vast fortune for prices, you know, standard wood prices of the day. And he was able to buy a veritable feast, sabaramul, baba ganoush, bats, eyes, eels, ears, all manner of exciting fare, and he took it back home, and he and his daughter had all this food, and they rejoiced, and it was fantastic. And the woodcutter, the week progressed for him, and he found that he was always able to cut larger bundles of wood than usual. He was always able to sell them for greater prices and more quickly. His trips into town were always much more pleasurable, and he found he was quite enjoying life. And so the week progressed, and the following Thursday came around, and as is the way of men, the woodcutter forgot to tell the tale of Mushkil Gusha. Dun dun dun. And late that night, his neighbors came knocking. And they said, "Neighbor, neighbor, please give us some of that wonderful fire you have, for ours has gone out." And the woodcutter said, "But I have no fire." And they said, "No, come outside and look." And the woodcutter ran outside, and lo and behold, streaming forth from his window was an unearthly light. And he ran back inside to see from whence it came, and he saw that, in fact, it was coming from the corner where he'd thrown all those pebbles the week before, and he didn't know what to do, and so he quickly covered them up with burlap sacks. And he ran back outside and said, "I have no fire for you," and slammed the door in their faces, and they wandered off muttering. But they leave our story here. Now, very next morning, the woodcutter and his daughter went and uncovered the pebbles, and found to their amazement that they had become gems of the highest value. Amethysts, rubies, emeralds, topaz, lapis lazuli, diamonds, anything you can imagine. And they were shocked, they were amazed, they couldn't believe their good fortune. And so they began to take these stones one by one to neighboring towns to sell them until they had amassed quite a great fortune. Such a fortune, in fact, that they were able to buy land. Such a fortune, in fact, that they were able to buy land opposite the king's own land. Such a fortune, in fact, that they were able to start building a house, nay, a palace. And they were quite pleased with themselves and all that. However, one day, the princess looked out her window and saw this grand edifice being erected opposite her father's own. She had a bit of an edifice complex. She thought, who would dare erect an edifice opposite my father's own palace? And I can never tell that with a straight face. Shit. And she sent out all her servants and spies to see what the hell was going on here. And they came back with a strange story about a woodcutter and his daughter. And it made very little sense. But the princess thought that she would send for the woodcutter's daughter, thinking she'd be quite cross with her. However, as it turned out, the two of them were very similar. They were similar age. They both had never known their mothers. And they soon became fast friends. Now one day, soon after this, the princess and the woodcutter's daughter were out playing in a pool that the king had built for his daughter's pleasure. These people are fucking weird, I'm telling you. The princess was about to dive into the pool, and she took off a gold chain necklace that her father had given her and hung it in a branch above the pool. And then she dove in, and the day progressed, and later she forgot about the necklace. And at some point she noticed it was missing. And first she thought she had lost it, and then she thought, no, it was that woodcutter's daughter. She fucking stole that necklace, bitch. Cut her. That's not actually how the story goes. But she thought the woodcutter's daughter had stolen the necklace, and so she went to her father and told him of her suspicions. And the king was outraged, and he immediately had the woodcutter thrown into the deepest, darkest dungeon, and the woodcutter's daughter thrown into an orphanage, and all their lands and money confiscated. Now, After a period of time, as was custom, the woodcutter was taken from the deepest, darkest dungeon and chained to a post in the town square with a sign around his neck that says, "This is what happens to those who steal from kings." And people would jeer, and they'd throw rotten fruit at him, and stones, and so, I guess things weren't so bad. He got stoned pretty regularly, so, there's that. Things were pretty shitty for a while, but after a period of time, the townspeople grew used to the woodcutter, and they would occasionally give him some food or some money. And so things weren't as bad as they've been, although still pretty shitty. I mean, the guy's chained to a fucking post in the town square. I don't know what to say about that. Anyway, one day, the woodcutter heard mention that it was Thursday, and he remembered how long it had been since he remembered to commemorate the day of Mushkil Gusha. At that very moment, a generous man walked by and threw the woodcutter a small coin, and the woodcutter caught it, and he said, "Kind sir, I cannot spend this money as I am chained here to this post in the town square, but if you would be so kind as to go into the bazaar and buy us a handful of dates, that we might share them and sit a while and talk, I would be most obliged." And so, the generous man was a man of many worries. He thought this might give him some wee bit of divertissement. And so he went to the bazaar and he bought the handful of dates, and he came back, and the woodcutter told him the tale of Mushkil Gusha. The generous man walked away, thinking perhaps the woodcutter was mad, but he found soon that many of his difficulties had disappeared, and he began to think quite a lot about the tale of Mushkil Gusha. But he leaves our story here. Now, the very next day, the princess went out to bathe in the self-same pool where she had lost her gold chain necklace so long before. And she was about to dive into the pool, and she saw there in the bottom of the pool her gold chain necklace there, and at that very moment she had to sneeze, and her head jerked back. And she saw there in the tree, her gold chain necklace hanging, and she realized that her mistake had been a terrible one indeed, and she didn't even finish her sneeze. She took the necklace and she ran to her father, saying, "Father, Father, I've made a terrible mistake. It was not the woodcutter's daughter who stole the necklace. It was I lost it." And the king said, "Hey, that's all right. Everybody makes mistakes." Kind of a big mistake, but that's okay. Anyway, we'll give her the benefit of the doubt. She's the princess. Everybody makes mistakes, and he immediately had the woodcutter released from the town square, and the woodcutter's daughter brought back from the orphanage, and all their lands and money restored, and they all lived happily ever after. This is the story of Mushkil Gusha. It is not always called the tale of Mushkil Gusha or the story of Mushkil Gusha. Sometimes the characters are not even the same, but this tale is always told Thursday nights. And if you give a gift in the name of Mushkil Gusha or share a handful of dates and tell the tale of Mushkil Gusha, you shall never go hungry or be in want. Will you tell the tale of Mushkil Gusha? Happy Thursday.